Can I welcome you all to this first EMCC Global GPS Dialogue of 2023. Really delighted to have Ruairí here from EDelia. Ruairí is going to be talking with you all about embedding a coaching culture and with a specific focus on team coaching and systemic changes that are provide a good backdrop for team coaching and that culture change. Really delighted to have Ruairí, not least because he was instrumental, or EDelia was instrumental in helping Munster Technological University, which was the first university to achieve its own international standards in mentoring and coaching practice, the ISMCP accreditation from EMCC Global. So really delighted to hand over the floor to Ruairí. I shall be keeping an eye on the chat for you all, but Ruairí, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nicola. It's lovely to be here. It's great to see loads of people from Ireland, which is, we could have met here. It was lovely. So look, let me just lull you into a false sense of security by throwing a few PowerPoint slides at you, and then I'll wake you up when they're over and we'll get you to do a bit of work. All right, so we're gonna look at team coaching and where it might fit into how we embed a coaching culture in organizations. But just to get us warmed up and just so you find out where the chat box is in case you don't remember, if you could give us any good news at all, cheer us up, professional or personal, throw it into the chat, something good that happened to you today or good news for during the week, and or what you would like to get from this session, what you'd like to be when in an hour and a half's time, what you'd love to be leaving with. So as I chat here, if you can give us some good news and give us some idea of what would be the really great takeaway that you'd like to get from this. Because when I look around the screen there, both screens, third screen opening up, there is so much wisdom and knowledge in this virtual room, and wouldn't it be great to even get 1% of it shared? So we're going to try and do that. So you type away, there's the chat box. Let's see if we can break it. Let's see if we can overuse it. I don't know if it's possible, but let's try and find out.
So Ruairí wants me to keep an eye on the chat, and I'm going to say, yeah, they're breaking it already, Ruairí. They've broken it.
Good. Okay, all for it. That's super. And when you come on a webinar like this or a meeting like this, you know, I get it. You're in from work. Sometimes you just don't feel like engaging too much, but the chat box gives you a great chance to share some of your wisdom or to pose some of the questions that we really need to grapple with, because truth is with coaching and with team coaching, it's just developing. You know, we are all influencing it. But you are coming here as coaches, and I would ask you to dial up your coaching skills, especially your listening, your inquiring, and your feedback skills that we might all benefit from this.
Ruairí, we've got some great wins this week, or over the last few days, coming into the chat box here.
Oh, please, let's hear one or two lovely.
They're lovely. They're lovely. Can you see it? Kathleen's hens are laying again. Harriet's looking forward to collaborating with other coaches. Ched's got 4 new friends. Afsal's launched a new website this week. Productive and Kind Day for Claire. Snowdrops for Di. Hi, Di. Birds are singing for Brendan. Esther's had a realization, which is great. Oh, good news for Jacek. Good spring soon, says Agnieszka. Wow, these are great. New thoughts about culture, says Harriet. Super. 2 new coaching clients this week. Susanna, well done. Sunny all day, says Erica. Wow, these are great. I won't read them all out, but it's nice to come into the dialogue with some really good positive.
And look, we can capture what people would like to get out of this when we get people in rooms, and we'll see if we can address some of those questions. Speaking of rooms, because you are coaches, you have your own way of being present for your clients. You have your own way of entering the room for your client, of getting yourself present for your client. And I invite you to maybe use that skill now to be present in as much as you can for everyone here that's in this virtual room, because you have experiences and you have knowledge that is useful to us, that we'd like to hear about. So whether it's how you focus on your breathing, whether it's how you bring your attention to, if you're holding maybe tension in your forehead or around your eyes, when your attention goes there, just notice what happens. Or when you bring your attention to your jaw, very often we hold quite a lot of tension there. Notice when your attention goes to your neck and shoulders. You can sometimes just feel them relaxing, or whatever it is that you do, which allows you to do what we need to do most of all as coaches, which is give our attention to our clients, be it an individual or a team. So how you do that is I'm just inviting you to practice it right now. How you enter the room. So just something that as coaches, I'm sure some of you have thought about this, but in particular in Western civilization, we tend to take an Aristotelian approach to how we look at problems, how we look at obstacles, and we tend to go with that person or group who are really skillful at constructing arguments, and the great Aristotelian skill. However, in some ways, I think we might have been sold a bit of a pup, because his predecessor, Socrates, who is what we can argue the first ever coach, had a much more, we would feel as coaches, a much more useful approach to dialogue, to dialogus, to inquire and to advocate together, so that we come to a wisdom that we could not have come to alone. And that is at the heart of our coaching approach, again, be it with the team or be it with an individual. And what's also interesting, as some of you will know, is that Socrates' mother was a midwife. And when we're developing coaches at EDelia, we often use that metaphor that we are there to help people to give birth to their own best ideas, to their own best futures. We are the midwives for people's best ideas. So we're going to be Socrates fans, and maybe we'll leave Aristotle alone for a while. We're going to encourage you to dialogue with us tonight in the rooms, and of course we all know when we go to these webinars that we learn the most from our colleagues in the room, where we get a chance to throw stuff around and to debate. But we're going to try to dialogue in the true sense of the word, about the shared inquiry, about let's find out what's the wisdom that we will come to together tonight in this short period of time, by taking a coaching approach to how we interact. So I would invite you, as we, and a lot of us are doing this, we're transitioning from old school individual coaches, where we've dealt with one client, or even when we, in the past, a lot of our team coaching, at least this is our experience, has in some ways been kind of group coaching. And as we are learning more and more about systemic coaching, and we're learning more about the different lenses that we have to adopt in order to be more systemic in our approach. And I'm going to invite you, as we discuss approaches to team coaching, to keep in mind that we certainly will be observing and noticing what's happening with individuals in the groups, our teams, our potential teams that we coach. But we'll also be aware of the interactions between them, which is another lens. How that relates to the purpose of the team and the team tasks, and then beyond individual relationships, how the team relates itself within itself, how it works together or not, and then how the team interacts with its stakeholders, and we have. And I'm sure you've come across organizations who tend not to include, as much as they should, stakeholder concerns in the decisions they make. And often there are stakeholders who are considered in decisions who really maybe shouldn't be in the stakeholder group. For instance, past generations. But we have organizations who often make decisions based on what people from the past might have thought was a good idea. And while we must always, of course, respect our forefathers, etc., we see it in politics a lot, where people make decisions based on what maybe dead people would have thought, as opposed to what the next generation might need. It certainly hasn't served us well in Ireland, for instance. And then there's the wider context again. Many of you will be familiar with this pestle idea, where we're taking considerations like the political, economic, social, technological, and legal and environmental considerations into the decision-making process. So these lenses, which are fundamental lenses of the systemic team coaching approach, it's very difficult to keep the same set of lenses on all the time, but just to be aware of that. And you might notice, as you are interacting tonight with us in this virtual group, you may notice, certainly maybe in the room, in the breakout rooms, you may notice not just what's happening for you, but what's happening with maybe some interactions, and maybe the group itself, short and all as it will be. And keep firing your reactions and questions into the chat as you go. So I'm just going to give you an idea of where we started with this in EDelia, as we engaged more and more with, and it's only in the last 10 years really that we've been engaging with clients on a team coaching basis, on a pure team coaching basis, because many organizations, they confuse team dynamics and team building with systemic team coaching. And it reminds me of what was happening in individual coaching 30 years ago, when people they weren't really sure what they were asking you to do when they asked you to engage as an individual coach. But there was an extensive study done on the literature. This was done by Helen Gormley and Professor Christian van Nieuwenburg. Oh my goodness, he'll kill me. I misspelled his name. That should be Nieuwenburg. He's now in Dublin at the Royal College of Surgeons. He's a part-time professor there, and he's back and forth to Australia. but they did this massive study. There's a link there somewhere to it, maybe in the next slide, if you want to take a look at it. We found it really useful. Just an incredible amount of work where they went through, as you can see, thousands of studies to try and figure out, well, what exactly do we mean by a coaching culture? Because we often talk about, oh, let's try and embed a coaching culture, but what does that mean? And they came up with a particular definition, which we kind of use as our starting point when we started looking at embedding coaching cultures in organizations. And it's quite aspirational in that, you know, organizations that have a coaching approach as part of their strategic plans and that is there in a transparent way, in our experience, are quite rare. But it certainly is something that we would aim towards, and we've used that as a starting point. So that study, which again some of you will have seen, but some of you might be interested in taking a look at it. But they distilled down the studies, and they made 3 recommendations that leadership was key, that targeted efforts by senior leaders promoting a coaching culture throughout the organization was really crucial to the success of embedding a coaching culture. We have found that that's also can be quite rare, and that certain amount of subversive activity needs to take place first before senior leaders can sometimes pay attention to it. The idea of coaching being an integrated part of the organization or system, as opposed to something that's done to organizations, was the second recommendation, if you'd call it that. And then back to senior leadership. Not only does senior leadership need to support it and support the embedding process, but that it needs to be role modeled. And I'm sure you've seen that with organizations you've worked with, that when members of organizations look up the organization structure, if they cannot see the behaviors that management is trying to get them to have or to embed, it doesn't matter what training happens. If they don't see it modeled, it doesn't happen. They just don't buy it. So they were the 3 recommendations. And again, they're 3 tall orders when you're at the coalface trying to embed a coaching culture. So the good bit, so the part where you get to meet new people, and please, you know, of all the most useful things of webinars that I've attended, it's the people I've met at the webinars that have been the most useful. And so try to get to know the people in your group. And when you get into the breakout rooms, we're going to ask you to do one of 2 things: to share a strategy that you've used yourself successfully, or maybe not so successfully, in your efforts to promote a coaching culture in an organization. And if you want to talk about in your efforts to promote it, to talk about team coaching, that's fine, but we're going to get on to more specifics about team coaching later. And if you don't have direct experience of working in organizations yet, then you may have a question, and there may be chances are there's somebody in that group that you're working with that has an idea or has already answered that question for themselves. So we'd like you to do one or both of these things in the group, and we'll give you 15, 16 minutes to have a good chat. And I might do a bit of Darth Vadering around in the background but I'll leave my camera off and just see that everybody's happy and comfortable enough. And as Nicola said, if you feel you don't want to join a breakout room, that's cool. will let you alone. I mean, you could be feeding your children or milking cows or anything.
I can see that Amy's driving, so yeah, absolutely.
Or driving, yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, it's okay. Don't worry. I shall pick you out and put you into a room, which is just be a quiet room. You'll just feel like, oh, where's everybody gone? But it's just because everybody's got their cameras off in that particular room. So 15 minutes, you say, Ruairí? Right.
Yeah, if you want to take a screenshot of the question or the task, then that'd be good. And I'm going, so it's share, you're going to share a success when it comes to you working with an organization or a group to embed a coaching culture. And if you don't have something to share, maybe you have a question that will raise our awareness about things. I'll stop sharing now, I think, and get to look at people.
I'm going to do some wiggling around.
And then myself and Nicola will look at the chat. Thanks, Nicola.
That's brilliant. So I'm going to switch you out for 15 minutes, and then
I'll go read the chat.
You'll come back automatically. See you then.
If anybody would like to, to share, not just in the chat, yeah. Sayama, thanks for that. Frank, hi Frank, how are you doing? Thanks for that. Command and control doesn't work in a VUCA world, for sure. All right, I'll just read out a few things here. If I can get, love Brendan's top-down, bottom-up approach. Managers as coaches. This is from Martin O'Malley. Managers as coaches, set the expectations and give them training. So interesting that a common help or constraint is the organization motivation to adopt a coaching culture. D, yeah. That it's a symptom or a problem that brings us in. Yeah. It may be less about promoting a coaching culture and more about looking at company values and starting from there. Harriet, thank you. Andrew, best way to influence organizations is often to find individuals who will champion the process, for sure. Making coaching part of the leadership development model and core part of the development program, not just a couple of hours spent on it. Yeah, coaching being a way of being as opposed to some kind of thing we put on every few minutes or when it's needed. A system, this is Leslie, a system will build a culture on its own if not led. Yeah, every organization has a culture, whether we choose it or not. You need to take the culture of the wider organization into account when looking to embed coaching, power gaps, departmental autonomy, leadership styles, looking it as a change in management process. Okay, super. If I've missed some of them, sorry, it needs to be linked to the bottom line of accountability and other KPIs such as engagement and flexibility. All right, it needs to be linked to the bottom, right? Built into fabric of organization strategies, policies. And I was reading the chat while you guys were chatting. I don't know, would I be putting Annika on the spot here now if I asked her, Nicola, to...
Oh, I apologise. I was going to ask Annika, and so excuse us if we're putting you on the spot, Annika, but you put in the chat that the question of embedding a coaching culture came up for you in quite a personal way for you today, and I wondered if you'd mind off micing and just saying what happened and what you did.
Oh, hello everyone. My name is Anisha.
Anisha.
Yes. And I'm in the UK. So I do work as a coach, but I've always done so one-to-one. And I decided I wanted to enter into organizational level coaching. So I've applied for a couple of positions. I had an interview today, and one of the questions was, how would you embed a coaching culture across the organization? So what I found in my research was one thing that I shared with the group that I was in, and this was to develop the idea of asking questions. So one of the values, which someone mentioned as you were reading out the feedback just now, one of the values of the organization is to be more curious. So the thought for me was to develop this idea of asking questions. So for example, let's say leadership who are open to coaching across the organization. Leadership would lead the way with not telling people what to do, having them figure out what may be best by asking them additional questions when they ask a question. So taking that coaching route and but normalize that by using their value. So if their value is be more curious, then it's not abnormal that the leadership is asking me a question after I've asked a question rather than tell me. And then the other thing that was added was to look at possibly bringing in a perspective that made it a bit more lighthearted and fun. So for example, you drive a red Ferrari, what would your red Ferrari think regarding this thing, or some other perspective that would allow the individual to think more deeply. So that was my experience today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anisha. Thank you for sharing this. You are the brave one, and that invites other brave people. If anybody else want to share something that they feel would be useful to us.
I had a question, if you don't mind.
Great.
So I went into my breakout room with yeah, that's right, it's Hafsa. I went into my breakout room. Don't have any experience yet of coaching culture or organizational coaching, if you like. And my question was, how do you quality assure a coaching culture? For example, you might go in on a 6-month consultancy program, teach them the skills that they need, and embed that coaching culture for as long as you are there. But how can you kind of test its long-term efficacy or know that it remains even after you've left?
Hey, great question. And it's as I could have planted you there now, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the international standards for mentoring and coaching programs, which is an accreditation, and then that EMCC have for. Which really speaks to that need for benchmarking against best practice. So we will talk about that, but that's the first thing that comes to mind when you ask about that. Thank you for that. There's loads of hands up. No, this is great. Tinike, have I the right pronunciation? Tinike?
No.
Yes.
Tinike. That's how I pronounce my name.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Ruairí. Is it?
Many of my friends are the same, but Ruairí is good. That was as good as you get. Well done. Thanks.
So two things. In my coaching, I've realized also that one doesn't always have in terms of a coaching culture, one doesn't always get the coaching readiness or the leader development readiness from the top. Ideally, it's steered from the top. That's just really wonderful when that happens. It doesn't always happen like that. And then what can one do then? So with my clients, I often actually use one session to transfer very successful lead coaching skills, with whether they use it for their performance reviews to get started, whether they use it for a crucial conversation. And then I encourage them to use those underpinnings of coaching. They don't always have to be formal coaching conversations. They could just be, how do you listen better? How do you stay curious? How do you step out of a expert mode into a state of what I call know nothing about what's happening in the internal theater of another's mind? How do you ask really good questions? And how do you answer other people's questions with more questions? And so you can ripple out. And so I found that works very well with my clients, because they actually start being very influential 360. And the other thing I wanted to say about my clients and the coaching you were talking about, I think you were sort of alluding to the ROI. And often I hear people saying, well, you know, it's very difficult to measure. And I find it quite easy because I ask my clients, what difference have you made? Are you aware of that you and your team have made in the company from a financial, they know what difference they've made, or even in a non-financial way. So it's very good to, you know, in terms of creating more awareness of the benefits of coaching, you ask your clients to actually keep their eye open on what is the return on the investment the company's making in their investment in coaching. And it works. So thank you. That's just all I wanted to add.
Thank you. Thank you. So great. You're right. We have to ask them and demand that kind of feedback so that we evidence this. But you know, you're articulating the balance that we all, and that tightrope between engaging the client and keeping the client engaged and keeping the client as a client, and yet trying to grow this culture within the organization. That balance between what the client wants and what the client needs. And we all struggle with it, and that's a point very well made. And I see Igor and Ruben have their hands up as well. Thank you for that very much, Ruben. I think you were, and then we'll ask Igor, and then hi.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so just want to share an exercise. It's like an introductory one. I asked 5 questions. First one is, who are you and what talent do you bring to the table? The second question I asked them is, what is this team mission? Third one is, what's working? The fourth one is, what is not working? And the fifth one is, what are going to be your priorities moving forward? So as we are moving across each of the questions, I take notes in a whiteboard so everybody stay focused on the same page. And I role model the coaching behavior, the safe zones, and trying to keep everybody connected, that no one's captured the conversation. And something that worked for me, that I identify early in the session, who's gonna be my detractor, the one who wants to kill me with the eye view, and I start working with that person. So when we get into what's not working, everybody's like relaxed, connected, engaged, and really can have deep conversation about that topic. And personally, yes, sure.
No, sorry to interrupt you, Ruben.
No, and it's worked good for me.
Ruben, are they the 5 questions that you're about to write into the chat for all of us? Okay, yeah, I can write them. Super. Thank you so much.
And beyond that, be vulnerable. Accept your weakness. If something doesn't get well, love it too.
Thank you. Ruben, thank you so much. Thank you. Igor, thank you for waiting.
Well, it was useful. Anyway, I have a dilemma, but I would start with the question, and then I would like to basically clarify this question with the dilemma behind it. The question for me is, how do you decide, is an organization good candidate for embedding coaching culture or not? And my dilemma is, because I'm working as a consultant and working on the organization culture changes now for almost 20 years, since 2005. And I'm doing team coaching only last couple of years in organized and systemic way. Individual coaching much longer. And same like we have with individual coaches, we have tools, ways to figure out quite quickly, is this person coachable or not? Is it a client for us or not? In a similar way, we have in team coaching, like key thing before you start with the team coaching is to understand expectations of your client, to have properly measured level of the expectations and where they are as a team. Are they a team in the first place? So because if you don't do that steps, most probably team coaching is not going to give effects, or not at least not give effects which a client is expecting, etc., etc. And then we are coming to much higher level, meta level of the organization, where we want to embed coaching culture. And it is completely impossible to do that without ignoring organizational culture. And for instance, if we have passive defensive or aggressive defensive organization in terms of their culture, which is very strongly against the idea of open conversations, etc., by default, is it how to say, a soil on which you can even put the idea of the embedding coaching culture, or you first need to deal with the organizational culture if it is possible, and then to leave it for later, or you do it in a parallel tracks? So how do you approach these kind of situations?
And are you saying, Igor, that you have a tool to analyze that, is it?
Oh yes, I'm. There are tools available to very scientifically and precisely measure organizational culture and to understand the culture itself. And I would never step in to work with the client on the culture before I would understand where they are in the organization.
And your difficulty is it possible?
My difficulty is basically because idea of embedding coaching culture, this is new for me, and I mean in terms of practice and everything else. So how do you decide if the organization is ready? How to say? Is the culture in the organization, is the circumstances is in the organization proper to embed coaching culture or not? How do you, how to avoid pitfalls in that sense? I hope that I was clear about that.
Well, I'd be interested to hear people's ideas on it, but if you're invited in to an organization, then you're the pathway around, let's say if you take Peter Hawkins' approach, you're going to be scoping and then inquiring. So at those stages, the scoping and inquiry stage is where in the end, you don't decide that really as a coach. It's the organization decides whether they are ready and how at the pace at which they go forward. I mean, just like when we are individual coaching, the client determines the content and the coach determines the process. With team coaching, we are in the same position. The rate at which an organization changes, if at all, is completely under the organization's control. What we as team coaches have is some control over that process, but we are forever contracting and recontracting around that. I'd be interested to see some of the tools you're using. If you put a reference in the chat box, it'd be great. That'd be good. Thank you, Igor. Hi, Len, and we'll take a.
Thank you. I mean, this is a very general answer to Igor's question. So in the past, I've done a good deal of diversity and inclusion initiatives in major organizations in the States, and the front end of those was a culture audit. And it had nothing to do with D&I. We were we went in there to define the culture. But one of the pieces that that we looked for as part of the culture, and I'm relating it to what we're talking about now, is that, what are some of the, I'll call it remnants or things that are there that represent that they're doing coaching, because we do that. And anybody, anywhere that's a leader, manager, is doing that sort of thing. Even if it's unconscious or doesn't realize it. And so find those things and bring those up to the leadership, and then develop those expectations that are required to develop a culture of coaching. And I'm doing that with the U.S. military now, but it's a different sort of thing. And one of the challenges, I'm coaching a lot of people in the military, and one of the challenges is, and they're aiming at that, but the confidentiality between clients is actually a challenge, because to develop the culture, it's almost like we all need to know we're actually doing this and we all want it. And yet at the same time, confidentiality keeps me from bringing those people together in a certain way. Yeah. So those are just general comments. But I think the important thing is to look at what is actually being done, even if they've never defined it as coaching in their leadership.
Yeah. And you do that using, how exactly, Len, do you do that?
Yeah, we use a lot of Edgar Schein's model to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Brilliant. Guys, thanks very much for everybody's contributions. And again, if you heard something, or you have a tool, or you have ideas about that might help us to do this, please put it in the chat, and we'll share them with people after the seminar. Okay, so let's just, why don't you guys relax a bit, and I'll throw a few more things at you there and see what you make of them. One of the challenges for us when we are engaged by clients, or when we are talking to clients about the possibility of maybe getting involved either in a team coaching engagement or in embedding a coaching culture, is we are often engaged because of a symptom, that there is a problem. And one or two people already mentioned this, that we are often engaged by clients because there's a problem to be solved. It certainly was in the chat there a few times. And we are trying to raise awareness around, well, let's think more about systems here as opposed to the symptom. And it reminds us that when we look at organizations, especially when we start to study team coaching, very often this is where the client is focused on the team dynamics, on the co-creation discipline in Hawkins' model, for instance. And yet we as team coaches are looking at, at least 5 different perspectives: the whole contextual ideas, the attributes and inputs of the team, the characteristics of the team, the dynamics, certainly, and Lencioni's triangle can be a great place to start, because teams identify with that, they understand it. It's you start with building the trust, and people get involved with it. But they're, educating our clients that there is much more to a team coaching approach than just the team dynamics. The team building idea can be a challenge. So when we talk about the whole idea of symptom thinking, we can actually get short-term gains. We can often be treating, and this comes back to return on investment, that the idea of us getting some traction with the client often means that we do end up treating symptoms early on until we gain the confidence of the client. But it usually doesn't lead to any core learning, and that's where we often have a challenge as team coaches, and this goes back to the early days of the whole team coaching evolution, or which was really, we could say, started by Peter Senge, and people would argue about that now, but and in his book, The Fifth Discipline, this idea of the fundamental learning units in an organization being working teams, and Senge's learning, his core learning capabilities, the idea of fostering aspiration, developing reflective conversation, and understanding complexity, understanding that often the changes we make in an organization, in a system, that the results of those changes, often we don't see that there is a time lag, and getting people to think in a systemic way is quite a challenge. But his 11 laws are certainly worth looking at and keeping in mind. The idea that whatever problems are in an organization are there because the solutions that were used or the solutions we came to last year or the last time, they're not working, that they have caused today's problems. The idea of we often get improvement in behavior short term when we fix symptoms, but long term things get worse again. And that idea, so I would, if you are interested in developing your understanding of where we are now with team coaching, it is, for those of you who maybe haven't read Senge, he's definitely worth a look. But when we look at Peter Hawkins' 5 disciplines and look at Peter Senge's 5 disciplines, there's quite a lot of overlap. Just taking Hawkins here and looking at the idea of the purpose of the team existing before the team is formed, and that one of our great challenges as team coaches is to help the team to discover the purpose. That why does the team exist? And of course, and Hawkins would teach us that the purpose existed before the team. In the case of an educational establishment, a need to educate the population existed before the educational establishment was formed. And getting an understanding of that commissioning then allows us to clarify, well, what do we have to do here in order to serve that commission, to serve that purpose? So this is the why, and the clarifying then is the how. How do we serve that purpose? And is the what we have to put in place to serve that purpose. And then how do we work together in order to serve that? So having this model of how we look at an organization, and you know, keeping in mind what Bach said about all models are wrong, some are useful, and having a model, a way of looking at an organization can be useful, because it allows us then to look at the connecting discipline of where how do we interact with the stakeholders, what are the empty chairs that we have at the board table that give them a voice, and then how are we learning as a team? Are we a learning organization, which is back to Senge's 5th discipline book. So Hawkins' 5Cs model is one of the ways that we start to look at organizations, that we try to understand what's happening through those disciplines. And then David Clutterbrook is the other popular model at the moment, the Pearl model, where you explore what is the purpose, and there's a lot of similarities between him and Hawkins. The external processes and systems that are relevant, right at the heart of it are our relationships, then what's happening internally, and then how are we learning, and certainly the EMCC world seems to be divided into parallel fans and 5 discipline fans. Either way, when we are engaging with a system, and we need to be here in our evolution as coaches, that we often start off with a models-based approach to coaching as individuals. We progress to a process-based, then on to perhaps a philosophically based one, but it is a systems-based approach that we need to be taking. So that developing a learning organization, embedding a coaching culture, it demands a systems-based approach. Clutterbuck talks about, the various, how you would categorize an organization around whether it's this is where we started with, for instance, Munster Technological University. When we first got engaged with them, there was little or no commitment to creating a coaching culture. It then becomes a tactical game of trying to put some in and trying to raise awareness until it becomes strategic throughout the organization and eventually embedded. And Clutterbuck's work on that is again a useful read. So as we learn about team coaching, we learn about models, but we also need to learn about engaging with an organization. And Hawkins tells us that the first step for an organization should be to engage with an external provider, to get that expertise, that consultation, that it's really difficult to do this internally before you start to develop the internal coaching capacity, and then working your way across this. This is how he would see it developing, and you can when we send you the slides, you can take a look at that. So we go from that to, well, how do I engage in a team coaching process? And this is a map of how we might do that. That initially it's scoping. I spoke to a lady today who just finished one of her courses. She just got an engagement. She got a phone call from a manager who said, "Okay, I want you to come in and I want you to work with our team." And what happens in the scoping, the contracting that happens there, this is a really fundamental part of how we engage with organizations, building the relationship, as Igor said, checking out what people's expectations are, doing the inquiries, and then co-developing the intervention. That development agenda is a co-creation. The execution and engagement is peppered with lots of one-to-one engagements and coaching the team as it goes about its business as usual, coaching the team in the moment, being at meetings, as well as doing the offsites. So that's the, again, a cider approach. There's there twice. So let's go back into our breakout rooms and see what has come up for people in the meantime, and what your thoughts are now on the role of the systemic thinking in enabling culture change. In if we are going to embed a coaching culture, what are your thoughts on the systemic thinking and its influence on embedding a coaching culture? Or maybe you have a question for the group. So please, as you go into the groups, try to make sure you come away from the group with a new tool or a new idea or even a new question, so that you can share it with us when we come back here. So if you want to take a screenshot of that general question, and let's go back and see what we can learn from each other.
Can I check how long we're going out for, Ruairí?
For 15, please.
That's fantastic. Right, I shall open the rooms up.
And it'll give me a chance to read the chat, and thanks for filling the chat box. Keep it up, lads. Okay, super. Guys, we've 2 minutes. So if you heard something really useful or you have something really useful to share, please start typing it into the chat. A link, a tool, a phrase you heard during your breakout room. We'd really like you to record it in the chat, please. And I promised earlier that I'd tell you a little bit about the ISMCP because we just found it really useful as a framework. We talked about like, how do we benchmark what we're doing? We found this really useful. It's an international standards for mentoring and coaching programs. You can get accredited by EMCC. And okay, so the key things is it's a self-assessment framework, which gives you, if I just go to the, I actually taken an example from our submission with Munster Technological University, but it gives you criteria, performance criteria under the various disciplines, and then you can check whether you've met them or not, and you can make a commentary on it. But it allows you to benchmark what you're doing in the organization against many headings, and we found that really useful. And what we're adding actually to it this year are the wellness benefits. So that under each of these criteria, we're looking at, well, what are the wellness benefits in this? But as a starting point or a framework for embedding a coaching culture, we found it really useful, which sounds like a sales pitch, but it's the truth. It's half a state. And it was really nice to meet everybody. Thanks for showing up. Put your contact details in the chat if you like. But Nicola's going to organize. The real important part now is the networking that Nicola's going to organize.
Oh, before we get to the networking, which thank you, it's a super part. It's a super way to end a dialogue, I think. But before we do, I'd just like to thank you so much, everybody, for contributing to this dialogue. It's always really great when we just get together and contribute as peers and add to the conversation. And you've all just been so brilliant and attentive and engaging. And so thank you to everybody who's come and engaged so well. Thank you.